So, lastly, Finola Lynch, Shropshire Care Closer to Home.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to this wonderful event today. I'm Dr. Finola Lynch. I'm a GP in South Shropshire, and I have the pleasure of being the clinical lead for Shropshire Care Close to Home. This is an enormous transformation programme of work that the CCG has led, but has worked incredibly closely with all our health, social care, community and voluntary partners in Shropshire to develop a range of community services that help support our population to live well, stay well and get the right help when they need it. It has focused initially on our population aged over 65, but that's just because at this stage that's where we've identified the greatest need. But eventually we hope this will be an all-age service. It's been co-designed, as I say, with all our partners and with the people of Shropshire. There are a few parts to it. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time talking about all of them, but just to give you a brief overview. One of the things that is part of Shropshire Care Close to Home is something called the Frailty Intervention Team. We now have two of those, one at the front door of Shrewsbury Hospital and one at the front door of Telford. And that's a service that, if appropriate, those aged over 75 who are admitted through the acute end of the hospital may be identified early and called in and managed appropriately for their health and care needs and potentially sent home within 72 hours if that's appropriate, with ongoing health and social care support to identify what brought them in and potentially avert a future crisis. Moving out into the community, one of the key ambitions of Shropshire Care Close to Home was to develop a range of community services that operate at the same clock speed as other urgent or acute parts of the system. That is something that isn't delivered consistently in Shropshire at the moment. But today I'm going to talk about a pilot for something called case management. And case management is basically a term, a novel term often for those of us who work in health, which is about where we talk to people when they are well. And we ask them what matters to them, and we potentially identify unmet need or issues, whether they be health needs, social needs, mental health needs, or anything else. And I love this idea of people's problems not necessarily falling into buckets, but they might fall into multiple buckets, and there might not always be problems that the person in front of them can solve. But if you've got somebody who's coordinating that person's journey and care, you can start to pull in the resources that individual might need. The best way to show you case management is to give you a patient story. And so Tom is not his real name, but Tom is an individual that one of our case managers met. He would have been a patient in a practice, and what we do is we look at the patient practice list. We identify those over 65 who might benefit potentially from case management, and we use a set of criteria to pull those people forward. That criteria includes things like number of long-term conditions or medications that they're on. It also looks at recent A&E admissions, as well as other potential variables. And he would have been sent a letter to say, are you interested in having a chat with us? And he would have consented to that chat. And that's when he would have met our case manager, who would have had a conversation with him about what mattered to him. Now, Tom was a gentleman who had had a number of admissions for cellulitis, which is a skin infection. And commonly, it was his legs that got affected. And the reason why I loved this particular story was because I could picture him very clearly. He was a very independent gentleman. He valued his independence. He lived alone, and he was happy living alone. He loved his dog, and his dog was very much part of his world and part of his life. But he kept going into hospital with this cellulitis. It kept coming back. And obviously what would happen is that he would only present to the GP when his legs were in quite a state, at which point the GP probably looked at them and thought, oral antibiotics alone, I'm not going to sort this out, we need something stronger. And he was almost well known to services for presenting like this and then having to go in at the last minute. Over a number of visits, I gather 6 or 7 visits, this case manager developed a relationship with this strongly independent gentleman who eventually allowed her to have a look around his home. And he allowed her to look upstairs. And that's when she found out that this gentleman was sleeping on a camp bed. And what was happening, of course, was that this gentleman wasn't getting the opportunity to elevate his legs appropriately because of the camp bed. And what would happen when his legs started to trouble him was that he would just resort to sleeping downstairs. And the reason he left it so long was because he didn't want to leave his dog. He wasn't sure who would look after this dog if he went into hospital. So it makes so much sense, doesn't it? And what the key intervention this case manager was able to do, this person, was she found a bed. So by giving him a bed, he was able therefore to elevate his legs appropriately, and I gather hasn't been near A&E since. But obviously that wasn't the only thing she could potentially do for this fiercely independent gentleman. But she was able to therefore chat to him about any unmet need he might have, any social care needs he might have, and to think about what can we do to plan for something like this, because inevitably life happens, doesn't it? Crises do occur. And if he was to notice that his legs were troubling him, what could he do at an earlier stage and feel confident that that plan would work for him? So there was something around also not just looking at his potential needs now, but anticipating the future and involving him in that plan, so that not only did the health and social care and whatever other services we brought in was working for him, but he was also having some ownership and responsibility for that. And I think that's a key driver in this program, that we want to enable people to help themselves. And I think on the social prescribing model that you saw prior to this, I think one of the key things about that is that it's enabling people to help themselves. And really that's kind of the kind of help that really works for people, doesn't it? So this is the first proactive multidisciplinary team service involving all our partners in Shropshire. And as I alluded to, it's been co-produced with our partners and the people of Shropshire. So the models have been agreed upon, and we know that we have buy-in from the whole system. So how do we make that work? So currently we are piloting this approach in 8 practices in Shropshire. It's been going since the end of last year. We now have 4 months worth of data information. And the case by Christmas, after just 2 months of doing this pilot, was so compelling that we are now putting forward a business case to roll out this service throughout Shropshire, but we will do that in a phased way. there's obviously plenty of information on Shropshire CCG's website, and we have a stand here today. But I think the potential for this is enormous, bearing in mind that only 42% of the possible patients we approached consented to be contacted. So there's obviously some work we need to do around the information we share about this and how it works. But if you think about that, we've only scratched the surface, potentially, of what we can achieve. And we know it's reducing admissions. We have the numbers to prove it. When we compare the 8 practices involved to their 8 control counterparts, there is a 4% on average reduction in emergency and non-elective admissions in comparison. And if we roll that out across the county, that would result in an awful lot of better care for our patients. And the aim of that saving, as it were, because really it's just about moving resource, isn't it, at the end of the day, is that would move back into the community to further fund and resource community services. So we're very excited about this. But the other potential, I think, is that it clearly links in with many of the services and approaches you've heard about today. That comment about, when someone is in need, all of us have jobs to do, but sometimes it's not our job to fix that particular problem, it's not our skill set. But if we're working closer together and we're coordinating health and social care and mental health and voluntary care in a more integrated way, it should be very easy to find the person who can help you. And linking in will enable that we're all working together, and for the person at the heart of it all, they're getting a much better experience. I'll leave it there. Thank you.